We all know about this leniency that we found in certain shuls, where they have a child hold a sefer Torah, hold a chumash, and Tosfos goes into this. He tries to connect it with different Gemaras and sources, if there is any permissibility. Now, in order to really understand this Tosfos, you have to really have the Gemara very clear. So we have to. There are different paths within Tosfos itself. That Tosfos there's the Ri and there's Rabbeinu Tam. There's two. There's within Tosfos itself there are different ways of understanding the Gemara. So let's just think about the Gemara. Maybe more than think about it. Let's actually look inside and go over what we learned with all these leniencies. So we started off with the first leniency was Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. And this was on page 47b. The first leniency, we must have about five leniencies over here. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi started out with the leniency of a child being in a cradle that he can join a zimun. And the understanding, Ravasi said this, and it says that he follows Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, but what it meant was that he can join a minyan of 10. He can't join a zimun of 3, but he can join a zimun of 10. It can be a sniff, be an attachment to the 10. And that was one statement. Then we had another statement of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi that even a slave can join a quorum of 10. And the Gemara had a problem with Rabbi Eliezer. Why did he have to free his slave? He could have just joined him to make the minyan, because a slave is able to join a minyan. And the Gemara concluded and said that he must have needed 2 people. A slave would work if you only needed 1, but if you need 2, you got to free the slave. You got to free one of the slaves, and the other one can be a slave. A slave is able to be a 10th man, but he's not able to be a 9th man. So, and that seems to be connected to the Gemara that implies that 9 is similar to 10. So somehow, to be a 10th man, we can be lenient to include people who are not 100% eligible. So the way the commentaries explain is they are eligible because it says v'nekdashti b'seich b'nei Yisrael. You can sanctify Hashem. Hashem is sanctified amongst the b'nei Yisrael, and the child is considered eligible to be one of the 10, except that it's not honor for Hashem to count a child in the group of 10. So if it's only 1 child, it's okay. So that concept seems to be the idea here, that he can be a sniff to the asara, that if it's 1, it works. And that idea we see as well with the Eved. And then the Gemara talked about, it got a little sidetracked, talked about going to a shul. And if you're from the first 10, you're get special reward. And then we got back into the calculation of who we can count. So we started talking about a Tisha, 9 people plus the Ark, which would mean like a Sefer Torah. And then the Gemara quickly said that can't work because a Torah is not a person. So the Gemara said, no, what I mean is that if you have 9, it's good enough because it looks like 10. If it depends on how they're situated, but if they look like 10, then it would be good enough. So that was another statement, this idea that 9 looks like 10, and this is Rav Huna. Then we have another statement, Rav Ami. And Rav Ami says you have 2 and Shabbos you can join together, and that's considered like a zimun. The Gemara said, what, Shabbos is a human? You can join Shabbos? The Gemara answered that no, it means that the 2 scholars that are sharpening each other in halacha, so it's sort of like the halacha could be like the 3rd person. So somehow that works, and the Gemara is satisfied with that. There was another interpretation there that it meant that there's a 3rd person who's not eating with them, but he's learning with them. And so the 3rd person, that 3rd person could join together, even though he didn't eat, but he learned Torah together. Then the Gemara said that Rabbi Yochanan says that a katan peireach. We have different interpretations. We have Rashi and Taisus over here that there's a katan, a child who either is not 13 yet, but he did grow pubic hairs, which are a sign of adulthood and maturity, and therefore he is able to be joined for the minyan. And we found a brisa that way. Or the other way of learning is it's talking about he is 13 years old, but the pubic hairs are not full. Either they didn't grow enough. They have to be a certain measurement and like enough to fold it over. It has to be the size, maybe like a millimeter or 2 millimeters, and it wasn't that size. So therefore, it's not considered. You would think, according to regular laws, it's not considered enough to be considered an adult. But here, for some reason, we're lenient, and we can include a katan peireach, a katan, a child that the pubic hair is not big enough, but he is 13, and we can include him mezamnin Allah. We can include him, and we also have a brisa that way. And the brisa that they bring has to do with this child that he does have the 2 hairs, the 2 pubic hairs. You could join a minyan. If he doesn't have it, you can't join. And then it says you're not medaktek with a katan. And the Gemara translates it to mean, how do you reconcile that? You're not careful with the katan. What do you mean? You just said he needs to have the two pubic hairs. So the Gemara answers that that it must be to include and that's where the page turns to 48a. It says to include a katan peireach, that it's including this case. And of course, according to Rashi, it means the case that Rashi refers to. And according to Taisus, it means the case that Taisus referred to when they gave the case of katan peireach. So the bottom line is, according to Rashi, the brisa is telling you that you can join someone who's not 13 as long as he has the pubic hairs. And according to Taisus, it means that you can join someone even if his pubic hairs are not large enough. You can join him if he is 13. He can join the zimun. Now, Tosfos now says that what's the next words of the Gemara? V'les hilchasa kuchol hani shmaitzo. The halacha doesn't follow all of these statements. To which ones are we referring to? Are we going all the way back to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, or are we going back to Rav Huna? There's room to say that you're going all the way back to Rav Asi and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because that would be the simple thing. It's going all the way back to all of those statements. But another way of learning is, well, the first statement, there was an interruption in the conversation after the first statement, because we first mentioned that a child who's in a cradle, you can join him for the minyan, right? You can join him for a snif la'asara, for 10 people for the zimun. You could join that child. Now, the Gemara did get sidetracked after that, and it gave it mentioned that if you have you come early to shul, you get the merit of all 10 people, or whoever else comes, you get all the merit of future people. And so the Gemara interrupted the conversation. So now that the Gemara says later, oh, the halacha doesn't follow all of these statements, there's room to say that it only goes back until the beginning of this conversation, which really goes back to that interruption, because that interruption means that the next Gemara is starting this new conversation. So again, how far are we going back when we say the halacha doesn't follow any of those? And you know what the halacha follows? The halacha follows that as long as the child knows who you bench to, that's good enough. So again, we've got 2 ways of learning. How far back does this statement mean that it says the halacha doesn't follow any of these statements? Does it go all the way back, or does it go 3/4 of the way back? And the reason it might go only 3/4 of the way back is because the conversation really started after we mentioned about being counted with merits for the first 10 in the shul. You get certain merits. So that's like a different discussion. So therefore, the conversation really starts after that. And so when we say the halacha doesn't follow all of these, it might just go back until there. So I guess the 2 ways of learning is, were we just being sidetracked for a moment, or was this like a whole new discussion? That's sort of what it boils down to. Was when the Gemara mentioned about the merit that you get for being part of the first 10, does that mean that the next Gemara starts a new conversation? Or was the Gemara just being like a little sidetracked, and really it's all part of one big conversation? And so when the Gemara here says, less hilchos ani shmaitza, it might be going back to all of them, or it might only going back 3/4 of the way because you had that other Gemara there that sort of split up the two pieces of Gemara. So that's one point that Tosfos makes. Now, what difference does it make to us? Well, I'll tell you a big difference. The difference to us is if the difference to us is if we paskin like that first statement. If the statement of our Gemara is less hilchas of kol hani shmaitza, the halacha does not follow all of these statements. So if that going back on that earliest statement, that means that we don't have to worry about anything it said before. All we care about is the child knows who you do a zimun with. The child knows who you do a zimun to, who you bench to. That's all the child needs to know. He knows that you bench to Hashem. Count him in. He's 8 years old. He knows you bench to Hashem. That's good. You can count him in the zimun. Right? That would be one way of learning. Because the Gemara said here, don't mind all the other statements. This is the main thing. You know who you do a zimun to. You know who you bench to. That's it. That's good enough. And you can, you have the final verdict. This is the final halacha, right? That's one way of learning. But the other way of learning is no. We have to take the first statement into consideration also. So there's a statement that says a katan, a child that's in a cradle, he's counted for a minyan. That's the halacha. Then all the other statements are not the halacha. And then you have the final statement that says that a child that knows who you bless to, him you can count in a zimun. And according to that, you have to reconcile. How does that fit? How do you reconcile that with the earlier statement that said that as long as a child that's even in a cradle, he can be counted for a zimun? How is that going to be reconciled with when you say that he needs to know who you bless to? A child in a cradle doesn't know who you can't ask him, who do you say Brochos to? Where is Hashem? You can't ask him that. But so how do you reconcile these two statements? So the simple understanding would be that the child who's in a cradle, he could join together. He could join together for be counted for a zimun of 10, but for a zimun of 3, right? He wouldn't be able to join, and you would need to have someone who knows who you bless to. So what I'd like to do is go through the way Tosfos deals with this, but in order to do that, I just have to tell you one more point, and that is Tosfos is bothered with a question, and the question that bothers Tosfos is that the Gemara says the halacha doesn't follow these statements. Now, Tosfos is bothered. How could you tell me the halacha doesn't follow these statements if we even brought a proof from a brisa to Rabbi Yochanan and we did not disprove it? If the Gemara disproved it, fine. But we didn't disprove it. It would seem like the halacha should follow Rabbi Yochanan. And what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan said that the katan pereach, the child that has either the pubic hairs that aren't large enough, or he's got pubic hairs, but he didn't reach the age of 13 yet. How could the Gemara just say the halacha doesn't follow that? We even had a brisa that seemed to prove that. So Tosfos says that you must say that when it says the halacha doesn't follow these statements, what it means is that it doesn't follow the simple understanding of these statements. But the final statement that we said of Rabbi Yochanan is not wrong. it's not wrong because we have a brisa that proves it, but you have to qualify it. You have to qualify it, and you have to say that when do you include this child? You include the child when he, number one, has these, he's 13, he has pubic hairs, they're not large enough, but he also knows who you say the brachas to. So in that situation, you can include him in the zimun. So that's the first point that Tosfos makes, that we're talking about a child that is 13. His pubic hairs have grown, but they're not large enough to be considered an adult. But the Gemara concludes, Rav Nachman, that as long as he knows who you make a bracha to, then you can include him. Now, if that's so, then what comes out is, would you be allowed to include an 8-year-old that knows who Hashem is? He knows who you say brachas to. And the answer is, no, you can't include such an 8-year-old. Why? Because the whole leniency here that we're saying of Rav Nachman is when you put both of these leniencies together. Number one, he's a katan peireach. He's 13 and he has pubic hairs. They're just not large enough. And together with the fact that he knows who you say a bracha to, they go together, these 2 points. That's when you can include him. So we're dealing with a case that's very rare. We're not talking about including a katan, a child. We're really talking about including a 13-year-old. He's just not maturity in the fullest sense of the word, because his pubic hairs didn't grow large enough. But because he knows who you say brachas to, that's why we can include him. So that is the first point that Tosfos makes, that we're talking about both. And that's one way of learning. It's this is the way the Ri learns this Gemara. Now, if you learn it this way, what comes out is then you have that story of Abai and Rava, and they ask them, who do you make a bracha to? Let me just mute everyone here. So, what is the meaning of that story? He said, who do you say a bracha to? Well, when he asked him, who do you say a bracha to? Was he talking about, did they eat food and he wants to include them in a zimun, or was he just testing them? So I touched upon this yesterday. If he was just testing them, he's just testing these two boys, Abai and Rava. That's one way of learning. But the other way of learning is he wants to include them in a zimun. Now, do you really think that these boys are 13 years old and they have hairs? They just didn't grow the full extent of to the full length. And he's asking them, do you know who to make a bracha to? And he's all impressed afterwards that they actually answered so correctly. Yes, Hashem is above, and they pointed to the ceiling. I mean, is that so impressive that a 13-year-old and that he's in such a scenario? No, that's not very impressive. Of course, a 13-year-old knows who you make a bracha to, and so you wouldn't be so impressed with such a thing. So it must be that these boys were not that age. They weren't 13. They didn't grow pubic hairs, but he was just asking them stam, like you speak to little kids. You ask them like an interesting question, you see what they answer. So that's what the Gemara is bringing, an example of asking children, but it wasn't exactly a case of zimun, because if it would be a case of zimun, they would need to be 13 years old. The only way you can include people that aren't 13, the only way you can include a child who's not an adult is if he's 13 years old, he just didn't have pubic hairs completely grown, and you're going to include him because he knows who Hashem is. But you wouldn't bring this story to him to be impressed that you're impressed with it, because the story is not that impressive. It's not so impressive that a 13-year-old knows who you say a bracha to. Now, Rabbeinu Tam is the one who wants to, Rabbeinu Tam says, I have a different take on this whole thing. So according to the first way that I just said, is there any leniency to have an 8-year-old do a zimun? No. Why not? Because we're saying that the Gemara says we don't follow any of these leniencies. What do we follow? A 13-year-old that doesn't, the pubic hairs aren't large enough, you can include him if he knows who Hashem is. He knows who you say bracha. So there's no leniency for anyone who's below the age of 13, right? That's the first way of learning. Now you have another way of learning with Rabbeinu Tam, and the way he learns is that we have to include the statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because the fact that our Gemara says the halacha doesn't follow all of these, it goes back only 3/4 of the way, which means we accept the view of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that a child in a cradle is counted, and at the same time we also say the final halacha, which is that a child who knows who you say a bracha to, you count. So the way to reconcile these two things is that the child who's in a cradle, he can be included for 10, and the child who is the child who's yodeya, who knows who you say a bracha to, he also you can include, and that is for a zimun of 3, and all the other things we don't follow the halacha. We don't follow them la halacha. We don't accept them, and he says, and the reason is because there was an interruption in the Gemara, which means that it's a whole new discussion, and the halacha doesn't follow the ones afterwards, but the thing before it we do follow. Now, so that gives you a little understanding of why in Shulchan Aruch we're going to have different views, because there's different ways of learning this Gemara. I don't want to go too much more into it, so I think that we're going to leave it at that. This is this is the discussion here. It has to do with how you learn the Gemara. How far back do you take that statement of the halacha doesn't follow these opinions, and based on that, together with the fact that how do we reconcile the last statement of the Gemara with which is Rabbi Yochanan's statement and Rav Nachman's statement, and is that also plays a role in the leniency here. So we're gonna stop with that. I will just mention that at the end of Tosfos he says, where do you come up with some leniency of holding a Sefer Torah or holding a Chumash? Where does such a thing come up?
Rebbe, can I ask, where did you get the name? I don't see any statement from Rebbe Yochanan.
So in the page 47b, 3 lines up from the bottom.
3 lines up. מזמנים עליו שלא הביא 2 שערות.
Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Katan Peireach.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's Zion on my thing. Okay.
Mem Zion on the base, 47b. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, the Tosfos wants to know, where do you get this leniency of using a chumash? Now, this lenience, Tosfos has 3 questions on it. He says, our Gemara talks about including a katan. It doesn't say anything about adding a chumash, right? If you want to include a katan, a child, you don't need a chumash. Our Gemara says you can include a katan, a child. That's it, even without a chumash. He says the only place you find such a thing is a story about adding a month to the year, making the year a leap year. And there it talks about you bring a Sefer Torah, but there it doesn't say you bring a child. You just use a Sefer Torah to be included in that 10 people to do the adding a month to the year, and that's a special law there, special interesting rules. But that is not a case where you have a child holding. So we have one place where it talks about a child, another place where it talks about holding a Sefer Torah, but no place does it put the two together. And he says also that the leniency of that, the ruling there, when you're adding a month to the year and you didn't have 10 people and you bring a Sefer Torah, that is only a scroll. If you want to use a chumash, it doesn't work. They needed to use a scroll. Our chumashim are not going to work. It needs to actually be a scroll, probably handwritten and so on, but it doesn't work if you just have a book. It has to be a scroll. That's another point that he makes. And so that is a big claim against a child holding it. Like it doesn't say anywhere that a chumash should help. It has to specifically be a scroll. Now, I will mention to you that it does sound from Tosfos that if you have a scroll, even if it's not the entire chumash, but it's only one of the 5 books, that would be good enough. There are such views that if it's one of the books of Moses, even if it's not all 5, that could be good enough. There is such a view like that, and that's what it seems like in Tosfos. But it definitely has to be a scroll, not a book. And Tosfos concludes about, so it comes out a big discussion. Can you count a child for a minyan if there's a child in the room that's that's in a crib or in a stroller? Can you include that child for the 10th man? And this would seemingly be the difference of the 2 ways of learning our Gemara, because one way of learning our Gemara is that the halacha doesn't follow any of the statements that we said before, and that would mean that a child in a cradle is not counted. Or the other way of learning the Gemara is that the halacha doesn't follow 3/4 of the previous statements, but the earlier statement it does follow, and that would mean that you could count a child at least for a 10th man. You could count the child, and that should be good enough. And that would seemingly be you could have a source for such a thing from our Gemara. So there are seemingly 2 ways of learning, and comes out a major difference in halacha. Now, can you count 2 children? No. It would only work for 1 child, but it wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to count 2 children. But there does seem to be such a leniency that you have 9 people and you have a child, no matter what age, he could be counted. Now, when do you need the child to know who you daven to? That would be for a zimun of 3. Then he would need to know who you daven to, and that would work. So what would come out is katan pereach, a child that he's 13, he has hairs. You could include him. According to the second way of Tosfos, you could include him even if he doesn't know who you say a bracha to, or you could include him even younger if he does know who you say a bracha to. And you could also include a child if he doesn't know who you say a bracha to, as long as it's for a minyan of 10. So that's what these are the different views that we see here, and this comes and plays itself out in Shulchan Aruch. Now we're going to continue with the next Gemara. So the next Gemara, we're on the 2 dots. We're at the 2 dots over here, and which is about 10 lines, maybe 8 lines from the top of the page. Page 48a. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, another thing regarding a child in a cradle. It says that a 1-day-old child does not need to be protected from mice, whereas a Melech Bashan dead does need to be protected from mice.
Right.
And also, another thing, while mentioning Oged, it mentions later in the Chumash, Yinereso or Eretz Barzel, that he had an iron bed. Rabbi Krasniansky told me that there's a medrash that's saying that in this case, Eretz could also be translated as crib, that even as a baby, he was a giant.
He was what?
That even as a baby, he was a giant.
He was a giant. Yeah. Right. Now, about what you said first, that would seemingly apply even to non-Jews. That, Oig Malach Bashan dead, mice will eat him. And a child that's a day old, or any child that's within his first day, the mice stay away. That's even a non-Jew. So that it's not exactly the concept here. In other words, here we're trying to include someone for a minyan. So, but it is mentioned. It is a medrash over there. But thank you for mentioning it. Interesting. And Okay, so we're now going to continue in the next Gemara. I hope I didn't lose anyone, but I think we got a little understanding of where the discussion comes from. I think that's important to know that it's connected to this Gemara, the idea of counting a child when someone needs to say Kaddish and so on. And we saw yesterday about the leniencies that brought in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah as well, the Bir Halacha. There were cases where there could be room for leniency in a Shas Hadchak, in a situation where you need a minyan. Okay, now the next Gemara talks about what does a person need to eat in order to join the Zimun. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Bered Rav Shmuel, Bar Shilas. Again, we're about 8 lines down from the top of the page, 48a. Rav Yehuda says, Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel, Bar Shilas, says in the name of Rav, Mishmei Rav, Tisha Achlu Dagon, 9 people, 8 grain, ve'echad achal yerek, and one of them 8 vegetables. Mitzdarfen, they could join together for a zimun of asara, for a zimun of 10 people. And so again, do you need everyone to eat bread, or can one person eat vegetables? So this statement says that it's good enough for a minyan of 10, good enough to eat vegetables, at least one of the people. Now comes the question: how many can anyone else? How many people can eat vegetables? Is only one works? So Amar Reb Zera says, Ba minei Rav Yehuda. I asked from Rav Yehuda, what about 8? Shmoina mahu. What's the din with 8? Shiva mahu. Amar li loishna, and he told me there's no difference. So the interesting thing is, why did Rabbi Yehuda in the first place say 9 and 1, and why didn't he say 8 and 2 or 7 and 3? That's an interesting question over here. Why does he have to ask? He wants him to ask him what's the din with 8 and 2 and 7 and 3. In other words, we know that in order to bench, of course, you eat bread, and the zimun is because of the Brochos hamazon. It's because of the benching. You don't do a zimun on people eating vegetables. But how many of the people need to eat vegetables? How many people need to eat bread, and the rest can eat vegetables, and that would be good enough. The Gemara here says that you could have a few of them. So why does he say specifically 9? Why does he pick a case of 9 and he doesn't pick a case of 8 or 7? So we'll have to look into that. But in the meantime, the Gemara continues and says that Reb Zera wanted to know about the 6, about the 8 and the 7. And Rav Yehuda told him, yeah, it's good enough. And then it says 6. In the different ways of reading this Gemara, is questionable how the wording is. But one of the ways is either he says, Vadai Shisha, Vadai Loimi Boili. I'm for sure not going to ask 6, because 6 I know is not going to work. Or he was saying, Vai, I wish that or woe to me that I didn't ask, because I wish I would have known. I would like to know what the halacha is. So he's either not sure about 6, if 6 ate bread and 4 ate vegetables, he's either not sure if that works, or he's sure that it doesn't work. Yes, Robert. You're muted.
Well, from reading it appears that as long as the majority are 6 to 4, then it's acceptable. So that's the leniency. That's the best that I can interpret all the writing.
In other words, you're saying that if 9 and 1 works, and 8 and 2 works, and 7 and 3 works, why shouldn't 6 and 4 work?
Yeah, because still
majority is majority.
That there's always quote unquote the majority. The
Right. It
majority
seems like
wins.
it's going by majority.
Right.
So what we're going to soon see is that there are two types of majorities. There's the majority, and then there's the majority that's recognizable.
Okay.
And that's where 6 plays a role. There's something called Roiv, majority, and there's something called Ruba Deminkara, the majority that's recognizable. This is very interesting because in halacha, it actually does apply in this area of Zimun. When you go to an event, and at the end of the event, of course, everyone leaves early. And so you're struggling to see, do you have 10 to say Elokeinu at the end of the event or not? Now, within the 10, even if you have 10 people, you have to ask them if they washed, because a lot of people, they come to these events and they like eating the hors d'oeuvres and they don't care for the bread. And the more, if they eat less bread, they'll get to taste more of the, special tongue and who knows what else there, or all the different hors d'oeuvres. And so therefore, people don't always wash. Then you don't know if you have a minion to say the Zimun at the end. So most of the people left already. You're lucky you got 10 left. And now you got to ask the 10, did you wash and to join the Zimun? Now, when you look around, so you might find 6 that actually washed. 6 washed for bread and had bread. And 4 were doing the hors d'oeuvre style. Now, can you bench with Elokeinu? Can you bench with Elokeinu? And the answer is no. You actually need Ruba Deminkara. You need a majority that's recognizable. You know what that is? That's 2/3. How much is 2/3 of 10? It's more than 6.6. It's like 6.7 would be 2/3, right?
So 7 is more.
So you need at least 2/3. 6.6, I guess, would be good enough. More than 6.5. So if you have 7, you're all set. But if you only have 6, that's less than 2/3. So here we have this argument between Reb Zera and Reb Yirmiyah. So let's look at the Gemara. So Reb Zera, now we don't know how clear this argument is, because Reb Zera says, either he says, I know it's not going to work 6, or he says, I'm not sure about 6. I don't know about 6. So either Reb Zera is unclear and he's not sure if you follow the Ruba Deminkara, you need this recognizable majority, or maybe just the majority works. And or another way of learning Reb Zera is depending on how the wording is. If he says Vadai Loimi Boili, if the word is Vadai, there's 2 ways of reading that word. It's either Vadai or Vai. Vadai means, for sure, it's good I didn't ask because I know it doesn't work. That's Vada. If you learn the word Vai, it's woe to me that I didn't ask this question because I don't know what the halacha is, if it'll work or it won't work. So he's either unsure or he's sure it's not going to work. Now, Amar le Reb Yirmiyah, the Gemara continues and says, now Reb Yirmiyah said to me, Shaper avadita delay iboylach. It's good. It's good what you did that you did not ask this question. Hasam time of my, why over there 9, 8, and 7 works? Mishum the ikaruba, because you have majority. Hachanami ikaruba, here also by 6, you have the majority. In other words, the majority of this group ate bread. You have a group of 10 people, majority ate bread, 6. Reb Yirmiyah says that's good enough. So it's good you didn't ask the question because it's obvious, like Robert was saying. So Robert, you follow Reb Yirmiyah's logic. But V'iyu Savar, but Reb Zera held Ruba Deminkar Be'inon, that you need the majority that is recognizable. You need a recognizable majority, and therefore he felt that maybe either he's sure 6 doesn't work, or he's mesupik. He's in a dilemma. He's not sure, but he's thinking you might need 7. So that's how this Gemara goes. now comes the next Gemara. Does any questions over here? Okay, now comes the next Gemara. Yanai Malka, Yanai the king. Now, Yanai is a wicked king, of course. He's from the house of the Chashman. Yes, David.
Yeah, in the Steinsaltz Gemara, it says that for the word vadai, it says from the Kesef Mishnah, early commentaries explained that the word vadai, vav dalid aleph yud, is an acronym for va'arba'a ochla yerek, meaning the 4 vegetables. So this is they're saying that there was 4 that ate vegetables and 6 that ate grain, and that's what the word vadai means. It's like saying that there's, of course, I didn't ask for 6 because it's obvious that 6 is not good enough because 4 ate vegetables.
That's very cute. I don't know. Where does he get it from?
Kesef Mishnah.
That's an interesting acronym.
And it says early commentaries explain this also.
Okay, very cute. Very nice. I have to take a look at the Kesef Mishnah. Okay, good. That's I have to see what he says it because it does sound a little surprising.
In Congress, they have a majority, like 51-49, and then many laws they need a supermajority. So I think it's like 2/3 to pass certain laws, not just a simple majority.
Interesting. 860. So in other words, what he's saying is that the word vadai in the Gemara was an acronym, and really it meant to spell out those 4 words. B'daled ochlu yerek. That's the acronym. So Shisha V'daled ochlu yerek. And that's the girsa. Okay, so
Va'arba'a ochlu yerek.
Daled. Yeah, well, it's really Vidalid. You're translating the Dalid meaning Barba because the word word Vadai has a Dalid. So Vidalid Ochlu Yerek. So, but it boils down to these 2 versions of the Gemara that either that which is fine that according to that that explanation, but there's another version that's Vi loimi boili. I should have asked this question. Woe to me that I didn't ask this question. And according to that, it means he's unsure. Okay, so the bottom, yes, Robert.
I guess my question is, Yanai was not a Jew, right? And so therefore, why does he want to have a Bechat HaMitzon at the end of the meal?
So the question if he's kosher for kahuna, if he's kosher to be a Kohen. But we're not saying that he's not Jewish.
Okay, well, I find that to be very contradictory, but it's okay.
That what? That he's questionable if he's a
Well,
Kohen?
no, because if he's quoted as saying he's massacred the rabbis, but he still wants to have the Birchat, it's like a contradiction of reality, I guess, for me.
Right. It is a very surprising thing. This Yanai has a very sad side to him.
Okay.
And basically, there was a big issue. The story of Hanukkah is a great, great miracle. In the Chashmonaim, we owe a lot of credit to them we owe our, they really, they stepped up to the plate and they had Mesiras Nefesh. They gave their lives up to win the war against the Greeks and give us our Beis Hamikdash back, our religious freedom back. And we actually had a very successful, they were very successful in doing what they needed to do. They risked their lives and they gave up their lives to really bring back the Beis Hamikdash and get it back and clean it out. And they led, the problem is that they continued being kings afterwards. Now, kings are supposed to come from the tribe of Yehuda. And who were these Chashmonaim? They were from the tribe of Levi. They were Kohens. And anyway, the bottom line is that this Yanai had a issue that he wasn't considered kosher to be a Kohen Gadol, and he wanted to be the king and the Kohen Gadol, and so on. The rabbis came to tell him that he's not eligible, and they so bottom line is that he decided he's just going to kill all of them. Now the problem is that his wife is the sister of Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach was a great scholar and rabbi, the head of the Sanhedrin. So he's killing all the rabbis. His wife says, "Uh-oh, my brother is going to get killed." So she quickly hides him. And we know of another rabbi ran out of the country, but I think Yeshua ben Prachya maybe. But bottom line is that Shimon ben Shetach was in hiding, and this story is where he comes out of his hiding place. And this Yanai is breaking bread with his wife, and obviously there must have been someone else there. They wanted to do a zimun, but no one knew how to do the benching. They didn't know how to say the grace. So he wants to get someone who knows to do the grace. Now, Robert is all bothered. He goes and kills people, and yet he wants to do a grace after the meal. Like, what type of a religious guy is he? He's so religious that he's doing the grace after meal, but then he goes around killing rabbis. It does seem very surprising. But you have to understand, the rabbis were out to get him, so he had to kill them. That's the way it works with kings. They that's the way they think. But of course, I'm a frum Jew. I'm a religious Jew. I killed some rabbis, But they think, that somehow we can't understand the way it works with kings, All
right, so that's the political backstory. And Bar Kokhba was part of that movement as well?
No, this is a different time. This is Bar Kokhba was much later.
Okay, I don't know that. Okay, good. Thank you.
At least I think. I would have to look it up in the books, but from just offhand, it would seem to me that Bar Kokhba was at a different. Actually, no, I shouldn't say later. Bar Kokhba
150 years
earlier.
Later.
What?
150 years later.
1 second. Shimon ben Shetach. Let me just pull over.
I'm talking about the Hashmonaim. I'm talking about the
Hashmonaim were right in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, 200 years before the destruction. And 1 second, let me just pull this up over here. Shimon ben Shetach, was in the Zugais, 200, right. Shimon ben Shetach was way before the destruction. He was way before the destruction. He's one of the Zugais, which are from the earliest Tanoim. So what that means is that Bar Kokhba was way later. Thank you, Isaac. Okay, so the Gemara continues, and it says this: Yanai Malka, Yanai the king, and Malka's son, his wife, Kricho Rifta Badi Adadi, they ate bread together, and what it seems like is there must have been 9 other people that ate bread and they wanted to do a zimun. They had 9 other people, so we want to do a zimun. But since he killed the rabbis, they didn't have anyone to exempt them to do the zimun. Now, it does seem a little surprising. This Yanai, he's pretending to be the Kohen Gadol, and yet he doesn't know the benching. Even children, know the benching. So it definitely very surprising, but the one of the commentaries says that this is it's really a based on a previous Gemara, that the Gemara says you're supposed to let a guest do the benching so he can do a berachas uireach, the blessing that the guest says, that the balabayas should be blessed. So Yanai wanted someone who knew that extra addition, so they knew how to bench, but they didn't know the extra addition of the Birchas Oireach, the blessing that the guest said, which we spoke about not that long ago, a few weeks ago. We spoke about that. There's an extra paragraph. Now that paragraph, most people don't know by heart. So therefore, he was looking for someone who knew how to do that extra paragraph, because the person who does the grace after meal adds that extra paragraph in. And of course, we're talking about they didn't have written benchers, and so you didn't have that. So that's why he's looking for someone to kill the rabbis. He didn't have anyone who to do the benching and to add that extra paragraph. He told his wife, "Man Yovlan Gabra de Mevarchlan, who can give us someone who can make the bracha for us." Amra Lei, she said to him, "Shtabali bi ma'sinalach, swear to me that if I bring you someone, bi ma'sinalach Gavra, delay mitzarisle, that you're not going to hurt him and you're not going to kill him." And ishtabala. So he swore to her that he's not going to hurt anyone who she brings. And who does she bring? Her brother. I see say Shimon ben Shetach achua. She brought her brother Shimon ben Shetach, who was in hiding, and she brought him, and he's now going to lead the benching for Yanai, the king. Oisve bein didei ledida. So Yanai put Reb Shimon ben Shetach in between him and his wife. Amar lei. So he told Yanai. Yanai told him. Amar lei. He told him. It means Yanai told Reb Shimon ben Shetach, Chazis kama yikara vidnalach. Look at what an honor I'm giving you. I'm letting you sit up here and next to me and the queen. And he says, Amar lei lav at kam maikrasli. It's not you who's honoring me. Ela ayraisa hu the maikrali. The Torah that is that who honors me. The chsiv, as it says, sal saleha usrei memeka. The Torah elevates, exalts people who are sal saleha, those that are isek, that are toiling in it. Techabedcha ti sechab kena. It honors when you hug it. And so he was a little blunt in answering back Yanai and telling him straight out, it's not you who's honoring me, it's the Torah that's honoring me. So Amar La, so Yanai told his wife, you see, he doesn't accept my kingship, my master, my being in charge, my rulership. He doesn't accept it. So in the end, so he said, okay, let me just give him the cup and give him the cup to do the benching. Amar, he said, how can I do the benching? What am I going to say? Did I eat together with you? He tells, he's like, well, how am I doing the benching? What did I do? What am I going to say? Baruch sha'achal Yanai v'chaverav mishalei. Blessed is the fact that Yanai ate. Well, what about, we're supposed to say, blessed is that sha'achal nu, we ate. He says, I didn't eat anything. I can't do a grace after meal if I didn't eat anything. So shasya lahu kasa. So he says, okay, you know what? The cup they gave me this cup. I'll drink it. So this way, I'll have at least participated in the meal, and by drinking this cup of wine, and then yavole kasachrina uvar. So they gave him another cup, and he was able to bench. So first thing you see is you need to at least eat something to do the grace, and it'll be counted to join them. And then they brought him another cup to do the bracha, the brachas hamazon. So the Gemara says that Amar Rab Abba, Berei Rab Chia bar Abba, Shimon ben Shetach David. So Rab Abba, the son of Rab Chia bar Abba, says, some say it's in the name of Rab Yechon, said Shimon ben Shetach that did this, Legarmehu David. He followed his own opinion that he didn't eat with them. He only drank a cup of wine, and yet he made a bracha, an after bracha, and he exempted them. Because we know that Reb Chia bar Abba says in the name of Reb Yochanan, forever, you can't exempt others from their obligation of benching. You can only exempt them if you eat a kazayas of dagon, of grain. And only if so could you exempt other people in benching. Shimon ben Shetach did not eat bread. What did he do? He only drank a cup of wine. How could he exempt them? But he followed his view that such a thing as such a thing is okay, but and that's what he did, but that's not the accepted view, at least the way Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Yochanan says that you can't do such a thing. So what comes out over here is that you need to at least have a drink to participate in the zimun, to be able to be counted with the zimun. And the drink, although the case is that he drank wine, but the understanding is anything as long as it's not water, you could join together. Even you could join together for the zimun. Now, there is a big question on this Gemara. The big question is, and even Rashi asked it, Tosfos asked it, is if you eat a kazayas of bread, are you obligated to say the grace after meal? You ate an olive size of bread. Yes, you're obligated to say the grace after meal. Your friend ate a whole meal, right? He ate a whole meal and he is satisfied. Is he obligated to say grace after meal? He ate a whole meal. He ate 5 slices of bread. Of course, he's obligated in grace after meal. Is there a difference between your obligation and your friend's obligation? Well, if you only ate a kazayas, an olive size of bread, and your friend ate, a whole meal and he's satisfied, so your obligation to bench is only rabbinic. Your friend's obligation to bench is biblical. Can you lead the benching? In the olden days, the way they led the benching is they exempted the other people for the benching, right? You exempt the other person. You say the benching and he says amen to all the, nowadays we don't do it this way, but that's the way it was done, where you said the grace after the meal, the other. So when you have a group of people, one of them just ate the bread as a snack, like he only ate a kazayas. The other people ate a whole meal and they're all satisfied. You don't have, it would seem like you can't have that one person who eats a kazayas exempt the other people who are eating a whole meal, because he's only obligated in a rabbinic way to do the grace after meal. And the other people who ate a full meal and they were satisfied, they're obligated biblically. What do I mean? Well, the pasuk, the verse says, "V'achalta v'savata uveirachta." You're supposed to eat, be satisfied, and then you bench. That's the way it says in the Torah. Now, the rabbi said, no, even if you eat a kazayas, you should bench. That's a rabbinic obligation, but it's not biblical. So if you're only obligated rabbinically in benching, your blessing can't exempt someone who's obligated biblically. At least that's what it would seem. But what does our Gemara say? Our Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan said you can't exempt other people unless you eat a kazayas, unless you eat an olive size. Shouldn't say that. It should say you can't exempt other people unless you're satisfied, unless you eat enough till satisfaction of bread. Not an olive size. An olive size would seemingly not be enough. So Rashi is bothered with this question. And the question is even more problematic because we do have a previous Gemara that said that a child cannot exempt an adult because the child eats, he's only obligated rabbinically, and an adult eats, he's obligated biblically. So we have like a source that the child can't exempt an adult. It would seem this should fall into the same category. So if you want to look in Rashi, Ad Sheyochel Kazayas Dagan, this is the last Rashi on the page of 48a. Rashi says, Ad Sheyochel Kazayas Dagan, until he eats a olive size of grain, Kazayas Dagan Miyamap. If he does eat, once he eats that, when he eats that, he, however, can now exempt others. Even though the measurement of a kazayas, an olive size, is a measurement of the rabbis, so seemingly not work. Like it says in that chapter, third chapter. However, even the Mechayiv Midrabanan, Since he's obligated rabbinically, that's good enough. And he can even exempt others for their obligation once he's obligated rabbinically. Now, what about a child? Why can't a child exempt the adults? We don't say this for a child. Why don't we say for a child he can exempt others? Because he's obligated rabbinically, let him exempt others that are biblically obligated. Because he says, because a child, when a child does mitzvahs, this is a very famous Rashi. Rashi says a powerful statement. He says it's not that the child is obligated, it's the father is obligated in the child. So the child can't exempt another adult in his benching because the child doesn't have an obligation of benching. It's the father that's obligated to teach the child to bench. It's the mitzvah of the father. So chinuch is a mitzvah of the father, not of the child. This is a very unique view that Rashi holds. It's on the father to be mechanech the child. So the way Rashi learns is that a person who's obligated rabbinically can exempt a biblically obligated person, but a child can't exempt anyone because a child is not called obligated at all. His father is obligated rabbinically to teach him. Now, the Baal Halachas Gedolos Pasak, Davka De'achlu Inu Kazayas Ekebetza Dekavosei. The Baal Halachas Gedolos has another answer. He says, you know what we're talking about? You can exempt others if they also only ate an olive size. If they also only ate an olive size, so why can't you exempt them? You could exempt them because you ate an olive size and they ate an olive size. That should be good enough. But if they ate enough to be satisfied, then you cannot exempt them. But Rashi says, I don't like the Bahag's shot. I don't like this explanation because you can't fit it with the story. You think a king only ate an olive size? The king ate 2 meals, right? He packed it in. The king, he's not gonna be cheap. They must have eaten and been satisfied as a king. The king's meal. You think he's eating a little nibble? Shimon ben Shetach, and Shimon ben Shetach exempted him. Now, and he says that really he could exempt the Gemara said the lagarmehu da'avid. He did it because that's his own opinion. Rashi explains when it says that's his own opinion, it doesn't mean that he can exempt someone that this is his own view, and that's why he was able to exempt them. That's only explaining why wine he could exempt them, even though he only drank wine. But the fact that eating a kazayas that would exempt, that is because when a person eats a kazayas, a person eats an olive size of dagon, that works. You're able to exempt even someone who's obligated biblically because you're considered eligible to exempt others once you're obligated rabbinically. And that would give you the ability to even exempt someone who's obligated even according to the Torah. So that's the conclusion of Rashi. Tosfos has another explanation, but my time is up. So we'll have to learn Tosfos tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, Zai Gesund, everyone. And
Thank you,
Rebbe. See you
Good day.
later. Call.
Thank you.